The rain falls in thick sheets, each drop a sharp reminder of the night that feels colder than it should. On a quiet street, the distant sound of thunder mingles with the frantic scratching of claws against the door. Inside, a soft light flickers, casting long shadows on the wooden floor. The door creaks open, revealing a dog nervously pacing, muzzle bloodied, eyes wide with fear. But it's not just the dog that's broken. The moment he enters, something shifts in the room. The scent of wet fur, dirt, and raw, unspoken pain fills the air. His name is Charlie, a stray dog who never asked for anything but survival. Tonight he's carrying more than just his own weight. A second figure lies at his feet, barely breathing, a small, trembling shape. Another stray, wounded, desperate. It's clear Charlie's journey isn't over yet. Not by a long shot. What happens next will change everything, not just for the two of them, but for the woman who finds herself suddenly thrust into their world. But right now, there is only the soft sound of breathing, the desperate push of paws against the floor, and the overwhelming, unspoken plea in Charlie's eyes. The night before Charlie found the injured dog, he had wandered the streets alone, just as he always did. His coat was thin, his bones pressed painfully against his skin, but there was something in his gaze, something resolute, despite it all. He wasn't searching for food, shelter, or even comfort. He was searching for a reason to keep going. That's when he found her. The tiny bundle of fur abandoned, alone in a corner of a narrow alley. Her breathing was shallow, her ribs visible beneath matted fur, and her eyes were barely open, clouded with pain. There was no human around, only Charlie who, despite his own suffering, knew what it was like to be helpless. Without thinking, he nudged her, tried to get her to stand. But she couldn't. There was no time to waste. Charlie didn't hesitate. He gathered her up as best as he could, dragging her through the alley, his own frailty never enough to slow his urgency. When the door opened, it wasn't just for the injured dog, it was for him too. The woman, whose name was Evelyn, hadn't expected her quiet evening to be disrupted by this. But there he was, Charlie, pacing in circles like he couldn't find the words, his body still trembling from the weight of his burden. Evelyn's heart clenched at the sight of the small body he carried. She hadn't been prepared to welcome anyone that night, let alone a dog that wasn't hers. The storm outside raged on, and in the dim light she saw Charlie's eyes, not just frightened, but deeply pleading. She opened the door wider. He stepped forward, looking back as if to ensure she would follow. The injured dog lay on the cold floor, and Evelyn, driven by an unfamiliar sense of responsibility, sank to her knees beside it. She was no stranger to pain, but this was different. The dog wasn't just hurt physically. He carried the weight of the world in his gaze. Evelyn didn't know what was happening, but she felt something inside her stir. There was something in Charlie that spoke to her. Something primal. Something that couldn't be ignored. Her hand hovered over the injured dog, trembling as she made the first attempt to help. She didn't know if she could save them both, but she had to try. Days passed in a blur of tenderness and raw emotion. Evelyn found herself in a routine of sorts, cleaning the wounds on the injured dog, whom she had come to call Daisy. But it wasn't the care that consumed her thoughts. It was the silence between her and Charlie. Every glance he shot her was filled with something she couldn't place. Trust. Hope. There was no way to know, not without breaking the silence between them. One evening, after Charlie had helped her collect more supplies, he stood by the window, his eyes scanning the horizon as if waiting for something. He'd grown quieter, more patient. In the days since Daisy's arrival, Evelyn couldn't help but notice the way he lingered near the door, as though he were reluctant to leave. But what held him here? Was it Daisy, or was it her? A gentle nudge against her leg startled her from her thoughts. Charlie's eyes were steady, unwavering, and for the first time, she saw it clearly. He was asking for something she hadn't yet realized she could give. Trust. And maybe, just maybe, he was beginning to believe in her too. Healing wasn't just about physical wounds. It was about learning to trust again. Daisy had been fragile, broken in ways that went beyond the bruises on her body. She didn't trust anyone, especially humans, but slowly, she began to find comfort in the quiet rhythm of Evelyn's care. It wasn't immediate, but over time, Evelyn could see the changes. Daisy's tail wagging cautiously, her eyes softening. And then there was Charlie, always near, always watching. He had found his place. Not as a stray, not as a wanderer, but as something else, a protector. It was in the way he lay beside Daisy at night, keeping her close, his body a shield against the dark. Evelyn watched them together, feeling the weight of her decision to open the door that night. It hadn't been easy. Nothing about this journey had been. But there was a quiet peace that had settled in their little home. Daisy was healing, but so was Charlie. And maybe, just maybe, so was Evelyn. The bonds between them, formed in the quiet moments, were growing stronger with each passing day. The storm had passed. It wasn't just the weather, but something deeper. A shift in the world around them. Evelyn had always thought she was the one offering a second chance. But as she stood there, watching Charlie and Daisy, she realized the truth. They had saved her, just as much as she had saved them. It wasn't just about the physical wounds anymore. It was about the journey, the choices, and the courage to embrace the unknown. The house, which had once felt empty and quiet, was now alive with the sound of paws on hardwood floors, the quiet rustle of fur brushing against the furniture. Evelyn's heart swelled as she looked at them. Her two companions, both broken and mended in their own ways. There was no clear line between who had saved whom. But as they sat together by the window, the first rays of morning light breaking through the clouds, Evelyn knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning of their story. The first chapter had been written with pain, but the rest would be written with love. As Evelyn reached down to pet Charlie, she realized that not all rescues had to be planned. Some were just meant to be. The days grew longer, but the pain of the past never fully left. Charlie and Daisy had learned to trust Evelyn. But it wasn't just the healing that brought them closer. It was the shared understanding of what it meant to be lost and found. Charlie, who had spent so long wandering the streets, now had a place to rest. Daisy, once so small and frail, had begun to run, her spirit flickering back to life with every playful pounce she made at Charlie. Evelyn watched them both, always in the background, never pushing but always there, grounding them as much as they were grounding her. But there was an underlying tension that Evelyn couldn't ignore, the growing sense that Charlie wasn't just at peace with his new life. There was something more. Every now and then, he would leave the house, disappearing for hours, returning with that same anxious look, eyes darting like he was waiting for something he couldn't name. Evelyn wondered if there was still a part of him that needed to be free. As the months passed, she couldn't shake the feeling that Charlie wasn't done with his journey. There was something unfinished in his soul. One morning, when the air was still heavy with the lingering scent of rain, Charlie didn't come back. Evelyn stood in the doorway, her heart tightening. Daisy stood beside her, her ears pricked, as if she too sensed the absence. The house felt colder, quieter without Charlie's presence. It was as if the weight of everything they had been through had suddenly come to a head. Charlie had left, but not in the way she feared. He had gone to find his place in the world, a place that, for now, didn't include them. Days turned into weeks. Evelyn's routine didn't change. She fed Daisy, cared for her wounds, watched her grow into a stronger, happier version of the pup she had once been. But in the quiet of the house, Evelyn felt the weight of Charlie's absence. She had never realized how deeply he had become a part of her life. He wasn't just the dog who had brought the injured stray home. He had brought life into her home, into her soul. One night, when the sky was clear and the stars twinkled brightly, Evelyn couldn't take it any longer. She grabbed her coat, stepped outside, and walked into the dark streets. Daisy, always by her side, trotted eagerly ahead. Evelyn didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't wait anymore. She had to find Charlie, even if it meant facing the possibility of losing him for good. She had to know what was happening inside him. She wandered through the streets, calling out to him, her voice trembling in the silence. And then, just as she was about to turn back, she heard it, a familiar sound, the soft scraping of claws on the pavement. She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat, and there he was, Charlie. His fur was matted and dirty again, his body thinner than she remembered, but his eyes, those eyes, were still the same. They were filled with recognition, but there was something else there too. It wasn't sadness, but something deeper, something that told her he was finally at peace with his place in the world. He had come to find her one last time. Charlie returned, but not as the stray who had wandered the streets alone. He was a dog who had found himself, who had found the courage to return to the place where he truly belonged. It wasn't a sudden realization. It was the culmination of every moment that had passed, every step that had brought him closer to this moment. He hadn't just returned to Evelyn. He had returned to himself. In the weeks that followed, Charlie seemed different. There was no more nervous pacing, no more looking out the window with longing. He had finally let go of the weight of his past. He no longer carried the burden of being alone. And as for Evelyn, she had learned, in the most unexpected way, that love doesn't always come with conditions. She had always thought she was the one offering a second chance. But in reality it was Charlie, and even Daisy, who had offered it to her first. Their home was quiet now, in a peaceful, settled way. Daisy slept soundly at the foot of Evelyn's bed, and Charlie lay near the door, always alert, but no longer with the same desperate energy. He was content. Evelyn would often catch herself staring at them both, the weight of the journey they had shared sinking deep in her bones. She had never imagined her life would be so entwined with theirs. And when the weather turned cold again, when the rain began to fall softly against the window, Evelyn sat by the fire, Daisy curled up beside her and Charlie resting at her feet. There was no more searching for a place to belong. They had all found it together. Time passed, as it always does, but the bond between Evelyn, Charlie, and Daisy only deepened. They had healed, but more than that, they had grown together. Charlie's quiet patience, Daisy's playful joy, and Evelyn's quiet strength had become the fabric of their days. They no longer questioned where they belonged. Together, they had built a life from the broken pieces of their pasts. One summer evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm, golden hue across the fields behind their house, Evelyn watched as Charlie and Daisy ran together, their bodies flying through the tall grass. It was a simple moment, one of those quiet, fleeting moments that hold so much more weight than the world realizes. Charlie stopped for a moment, his fur rippling in the soft wind. He turned to look at Evelyn, as if asking for permission to run farther, to take one more step into the world beyond their home. And with a smile, Evelyn nodded. He had come to her after all, and now it was time for him to carry the love they had built together into the rest of the world. Charlie ran, Daisy at his side, and Evelyn stood there, heart full, watching them disappear into the horizon. In the silence, she knew this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something far bigger, something that would forever hold them all, no matter how far apart they might go. The bond between them was eternal. The months melted away, and the seasons unfolded like the chapters of a well-loved book. Charlie and Daisy, once fractured, now moved through life as if they had always been part of it, as if they had always belonged together. The weather turned colder again, and the first snow of the year blanketed the earth in a pure, soft white. Evelyn stood in the window, watching the flakes fall gently to the ground, and for the first time in a long while there was peace in her heart. Her life, once filled with empty spaces, now overflowed with warmth. Charlie had become her shadow, always close but never demanding. He had found a way to simply be, to exist in the quiet companionship of those who loved him. Daisy, too, had blossomed into a playful, confident dog. She had grown into her own, no longer the fragile creature Evelyn had found lying in that alley. She was strong, full of energy, and radiated the kind of happiness that only comes from knowing you are safe. But still, there was a part of Charlie that carried the burden of his past. Evelyn had seen it in the way he would sometimes look out the window, his eyes distant, as if caught between two worlds. The world he had left behind and the life he had now built. He was at peace, yes, but the echoes of his journey still lingered, just beneath the surface. Evelyn had never asked him to forget his past, never told him to erase the painful memories. She understood that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about finding a way to move forward with the scars that marked you. And so, she let him have his moments of silence, his moments of introspection. She never questioned it. She simply stood by as she always had, offering him the love he had always deserved. She knew he would find his way back to her as he always did. One quiet afternoon, as Evelyn worked in the garden, she heard the sound of paws approaching. She turned, expecting to see Charlie or Daisy trotting across the yard. But instead, there was nothing. The silence stretched longer than usual. The air felt heavier, as if holding its breath. A gust of wind stirred the leaves, but there was no sign of either dog. Evelyn paused, wiping her hands on her apron, and walked toward the edge of the garden. The world felt still, unnaturally so. Then, just as the stillness seemed too much to bear, she heard it, soft at first, but growing louder, the familiar sound of claws clicking against the pavement. Charlie appeared from around the corner, his face lit with the unmistakable look of determination. Behind him, with a gentle, hesitant stride, followed Daisy. Both dogs had an air about them. Something different, something resolved. It wasn't just the way they walked. It was the way they looked at Evelyn. It was as though they had discovered something new. And in that discovery, they had found a way to complete their journey. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat as she rushed forward. There was no need for words, no need to question what had changed. She could see it in their eyes. Their journey wasn't over. They had simply come full circle. They were in their own way home again. Charlie trotted forward, his pace deliberate as he reached Evelyn. His eyes locked onto hers, steady and unyielding. Then Daisy nudged her leg, as if offering her a reminder of the bond they shared, a bond built on more than just survival. Evelyn crouched down, the weight of the years they had shared pressing down on her shoulders. She was overwhelmed by the quiet, steady presence of the two dogs, by the simple truth that they had found their way back to each other. And now, they had found a way back to the world they had fought to survive in. It wasn't just about home. It was about knowing that no matter what the future held, they would always have each other. Winter stretched on, but the cold no longer had the same bite. The home that had once been a quiet, empty place was now full of life. The sounds of Charlie and Daisy playing, the gentle shuffle of paws on hardwood floors, the laughter that seemed to hang in the air like sunlight. These were the things that filled the spaces Evelyn once thought would always be hollow. They had all found their way to one another through pain, through loss, through healing. And now they were living proof that no journey was ever truly over. Even in the deepest moments of darkness, there was always a path forward, a path toward healing, toward love, and toward peace. And then, as the seasons shifted once more, Evelyn found herself standing at the same window where she had once watched the snow fall in solitude. This time she wasn't alone. Charlie sat beside her, his fur now thick and healthy, his eyes calm and steady. Daisy lay at their feet, curled up on the rug, her body rising and falling in the rhythm of peaceful sleep. The house was filled with the soft sounds of their quiet existence, and Evelyn knew in her heart that this was everything she had ever needed. She had learned that love doesn't come with a deadline. It doesn't follow a set path or a planned timeline. Love comes when it's ready, when it finds you in the most unexpected of places. It's not always perfect, but it's always worth the wait. As Evelyn took a deep breath, the sound of Charlie's steady breathing beside her, she smiled, letting the cold wind rush through the open window. It was the first real, quiet breath she had taken in years, the kind that told her everything was going to be okay. And with that simple truth, she turned to Charlie and Daisy, the two beings who had changed her life in ways she could never explain. Together they were whole, and nothing would ever be the same again. The storm had passed. The world outside their home had shifted in the most subtle of ways, slowly, imperceptibly, like the dawning of a new day. Evelyn stood at the kitchen window, watching the soft light of dawn spread across the earth, painting the landscape in hues of pink and gold. The house was quiet now, the kind of quiet that felt like peace instead of emptiness. The warmth of the sun filtered through the glass, a tangible reminder of everything they had weathered, everything that had led them here. Charlie and Daisy, though they had found their place in the world, still carried pieces of their past, small scars, quiet memories that would always be a part of them. But it wasn't a burden. It was a testament to their strength, to the resilience they had shown each day they fought to survive. Evelyn had come to realize that strength wasn't just about survival. It was about learning to live with the pain, to find joy despite it. And in the warmth of this new day, she felt a deep gratitude for what she had. For what they had. Charlie padded quietly to her side, his head resting against her leg as if seeking comfort, as if reminding her of their shared journey. Daisy, full of youthful energy, bounded into the room, her eyes sparkling with the playful curiosity that had once seemed so out of reach. The contrast between the two was stark. Charlie, the wary, steady soul, and Daisy, the vibrant, unbroken spirit. But in their differences they had found unity. Evelyn ran her fingers through Charlie's fur, the soft rhythm of her touch grounding her, making her feel connected to something greater than herself. She had never expected to be here, this version of herself, with these two companions, in a house that was now alive with laughter and love. She had always believed that healing was a solitary pursuit, but she was learning that, sometimes, healing was a shared experience. It was in the way Charlie had brought Daisy to her doorstep, in the way she had cared for them both, and in the way they had healed each other without ever speaking a word. And now they were a family, not by blood, but by the unspoken bond they had formed. It wasn't perfect, and there would still be moments of pain, moments when the past would resurface, but they were strong enough to face it together. A year passed, the world outside their home continuing its ceaseless spin. Evelyn had made peace with the fact that life was unpredictable, that the future was never certain, but it was also full of possibility, of potential. Charlie and Daisy had flourished in ways she hadn't expected. Charlie had grown into a calm, almost wise presence. His once ragged body was now healthy, strong, and his eyes, always so full of emotion, had softened into a steady calm. Daisy, with her playful energy, had become the heart of the household, her zest for life infectious and impossible to ignore. It was early spring when Evelyn felt the first stirrings of change. The air was warmer, the flowers beginning to bloom outside, and it was the perfect time for them to take the next step. She had always been wary of the world beyond her doorstep, but as she watched Charlie and Daisy, she realized that they had all grown together. It was time to open the door, to step into the world once more. They started small, a walk around the neighborhood, then longer outings, letting Charlie and Daisy experience the world they had once been so afraid of. There were moments of hesitation, of uncertainty, but it was always followed by something deeper, something stronger. Charlie, once so reserved, now led the way with confidence, as if the world had finally given him the chance to live fully. Daisy, always the adventurer, darted ahead, her tail high, her eyes wide with excitement. Evelyn, at first unsure of how to navigate the world again, found herself walking beside them, her heart swelling with pride. It wasn't just about exploring the world. It was about embracing the idea that they could be part of something greater. They weren't broken anymore. They were whole in their own way. Years came and went, and life continued to unfold in ways that Evelyn couldn't have imagined. But the lessons they had learned together remained, ingrained in their daily lives, woven into the very fabric of who they had become. Charlie had grown older, slower, his coat graying around the edges, but his presence was as steadfast as ever. Daisy, still full of energy, had become the protector of the household, always watching over them with a fierce loyalty that never wavered. Evelyn watched them grow, watched as they lived out their days, and with each passing moment she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had known loss, had known loneliness, but she had also known the beauty of second chances, of finding unexpected love in the most unlikely places. She had learned that rescue wasn't just about saving someone from danger. It was about offering them the space to heal, to grow, and to find their way back to the world, back to themselves. And in that healing, Evelyn had found her own redemption. She had found that it wasn't just the dogs who had saved her. They had all saved each other. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm golden glow across the backyard, Evelyn sat in the quiet of her garden. Charlie lay at her feet, Daisy curled beside her. The house, once empty, was now full of life and love, and Evelyn knew that this was the home she had always longed for. As the sky darkened, A soft breeze carried the scent of flowers through the air, and Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, letting the peace of the evening settle over her. She had always feared the unknown, the uncertainty of the future, but now, as she sat surrounded by the love she had never expected, she realized that the greatest gift of all had been the journey itself. And so, with a heart full of gratitude, Evelyn looked down at Charlie and Daisy, her faithful companions. In the quiet of the evening, she whispered a promise to them, to herself. No matter what the future held, they would always have each other. The journey would continue, and with it, the legacy of love they had built together. As the years stretched on, Evelyn knew that the story of Charlie and Daisy would forever be etched in her heart. They had walked together through the hardest of times and had come out stronger on the other side. It wasn't about perfection. It was about surviving, loving, and growing together. The house remained filled with the sound of Charlie's slow, steady breathing, the playful patter of Daisy's paws, and the quiet hum of life continuing. And in those moments, Evelyn knew this was the family she had always needed. The family she had built. The family she had found, not through blood, but through the raw, unspoken bond of rescue and love. And in the end, as she looked at them, lying side by side on the rug, Evelyn whispered, "We made it." The air was thick with the scent of autumn, the last whispers of summer fading into the crispness of the coming winter. Evelyn stood by the window, gazing out at the changing world beyond. The sun, setting low in the sky, painted the sky in hues of orange and pink. The days had grown shorter, but her heart felt fuller than it ever had. Charlie lay at her feet, his eyes soft but ever watchful, while Daisy, ever the energetic pup, chased shadows across the floor. The house was warm with the light from the hearth, but more than that, it was filled with the kind of peace that only comes after the storm. The kind of peace that comes after you've survived something together, something raw and real. Charlie, once a stray with a body worn from the streets, now carried an aura of calm that only time and love could bring. His fur, thick and soft, had grown back with the health he had never known, and his eyes, though still guarded, held a depth of understanding. The days of roaming the streets in search of food and safety had long passed, replaced by moments of rest, warmth, and companionship. But there was still a quiet strength in him, a lingering reminder of the dog who had fought for his life. Daisy, too, had changed. No longer the frightened, fragile creature Evelyn had once found shivering in an alley, she had become a beacon of joy and light. Her playful antics were a stark contrast to the stillness that often surrounded Charlie, but they balanced each other perfectly. Charlie, the steady presence, and Daisy, the wild spirit. They had found their place, and with it Evelyn had found hers. As she looked down at the two of them now, her heart swelled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. They had come so far. Together, they had fought to survive, to heal, to find peace in a world that had once been so cruel to them. And they had done it in the most unlikely of ways, through the shared bond of brokenness, of pain, of love. Evelyn had never imagined her life would turn out this way. She had thought of herself as someone who was meant to walk alone, carrying her own burdens, never allowing anyone close enough to share them. But Charlie had changed that. Daisy had changed that. In their quiet way, they had shown her that healing was never a solitary journey. It was one that had to be shared. She thought back to the moment she had opened the door to find Charlie carrying Daisy, bloodied and weak, in his mouth. She had thought it was a random, fateful encounter. But now, standing here, looking at the family they had become, Evelyn realized how much more it had been. It had been the start of a journey that had led her to herself. Charlie had taught her about trust, about the quiet strength that lies in patience and in waiting. Daisy had taught her about resilience, about the power of joy in the face of hardship. Together, they had taught her that love is not just about saving someone. It's about giving them the space to save themselves. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room in a soft, golden light, Evelyn's mind drifted to the future. She didn't know what it held. The fear that had once gripped her, the fear of not knowing what was to come, had faded over time. She had come to understand that the future wasn't something to fear. It was something to embrace. After all, she had already faced the hardest part of it. The rest, she realized, was just living. Charlie shifted slightly, raising his head to look at her. His gaze was steady, unwavering, as though he could see into her soul. Daisy bounded over to her, pressing her body against Evelyn's side, her tail wagging enthusiastically. Evelyn bent down, her fingers brushing over Daisy's soft fur before moving to Charlie's head. She felt the warmth of their bodies, the comfort of their presence, and for the first time in a long while she felt truly at home. The life they had built together was not without its scars. There were still quiet moments of hesitation, of remembering what had been. But they had survived, and they had grown. The bond between them was unbreakable, forged in the fires of their shared journey. And as the warmth of the fire flickered in the hearth, Evelyn knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. She stood up slowly, Charlie and Daisy following her every move. It was time for their evening walk, the ritual they had come to cherish. They moved to the door, Charlie waiting patiently as Evelyn opened it, the cool night air rushing in. Daisy bounded outside first, her excitement palpable, while Charlie moved more slowly, his movements deliberate as though savoring the moment. Evelyn followed them into the night, the world outside their home quiet, still and full of promise. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silver glow over the landscape, and for the first time, Evelyn felt no fear. She felt no uncertainty about the road ahead. They walked together, side by side, Charlie and Daisy leading the way, Evelyn trailing behind, watching them. She had spent so many years wondering if she would ever find her place, her purpose. And now, as she walked through the quiet streets with her two companions, she knew that her place had always been here, with them, in this moment. They had saved each other, in ways that words could never fully capture, and for the first time in a long while, Evelyn felt at peace. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to walk it. The bond they shared was unspoken, but in its silence, it spoke louder than anything else. And as they walked together, the cool night air wrapping around them like a protective blanket, Evelyn knew that, no matter what, they would always find their way back to each other. And with that quiet understanding, Evelyn smiled. The weight of the past lifted as the future stretched out before them. A future full of hope, love, and the promise of never walking alone again.